such a wonderful community to work and live in. We thank you for your service. I just want to say a couple things tonight. I want to tell you, first of all, that you work in a level of government that has more to do with the people's qualities of life than any other level of government. Of course, all levels are important in our society, but I think that if you think about what happens every day, from the time you get up, turn the shower on and drive to work, go to a good job, and then all the services that are provided, your local government's important in people's lives. And I would say that you can feel good about the status of your government. Going into the COVID on March 18th, the city went into that situation with the deepest reserves in the city's history, a good bond rating, very highly competent workforce, and I'm very proud of the job they've done to work us through this year. It hasn't been easy. You've been, as a community, so helpful and cooperative in helping us fight back against this virus. Unfortunately, there were businesses that had to be closed down and children that weren't able to go to school, and a lot of changes to our lives. But we come out of that in relatively good condition. A few months ago, what we expected to see is losses in revenue to the city and therefore reductions potentially in services. They didn't materialize, and in many ways because of the resiliency of all of you as community members, and also because I think some good moves were made by the city council and our organization to reduce spending and to get us to this point where we can have some optimism moving forward. Our goals now are just to make sure that people get vaccinated, and we continue to be diligent in how we resist the spread of this virus. And we move on with business as we are tonight. And with that, we thank you so much for your service. We need you more than ever. You've been there for us for so many years. And again, thanks very much on behalf of the staff of the city for all you do for the city of Westminster and our quality of life.
Hi, everybody. I'm Abby. I'm from the city clerk's office. I've been emailing most of you, and so you should at least know my name. I'm going to start it off with just a short overview of what your role as boards and commissions members looks like. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll address them at the end, or maybe as we go along, depending on how this breaks out. So, as boards and commissions members, you all have different roles and duties. There are 9 different boards in the city that have 9 different charges, but there are some things that are equal to all boards all boards and commissions members across the city. For example, you're expected to attend all the meetings of boards and commissions, including the alternates to the boards. You have to develop bylaws, and those bylaws are subject to council approval, and they do review them on a regular basis. You also have to elect a chair and a vice chair at the first meeting of odd-numbered years, and that they serve for 2 years, I'm sorry. And you have to have been on the board for a year at least to serve in one of those roles. In the rare occasion there's not a board member who's been there for a year, you do just elect the most eligible member then. And if a vacancy occurs during those 2-year terms, like somebody resigns or steps down, then you elect somebody from your board to serve the remainder of the term. Each of your boards has a council liaison, and each of the liaisons, they get those roles. I apologize. They get those roles at the beginning of the year, and sometimes they change, and sometimes they're on for a few years. But the role of the council liaison is to act as your window of communication to the council. They attend the board meetings or keep in touch with the board, and then they report back to their council at council meetings in order to make their colleagues aware of what the board is doing, as well as announcing it in public meetings, so everyone in the city can attend, or I'm sorry, everyone in the city knows what's going on. You also have a staff liaison, Your staff liaison is in charge of all the administrative roles. They schedule the meetings, they prepare agendas, they publish the hearing notices, and they take minutes. And we'll talk about the notices shortly, but the minutes become part of the permanent record of the city. So there are rules that govern all board members. Those rules come from, some of them come from the Westminster Municipal Code. And one of those rules is attendance. So you do have attendance requirements. You can have excused absences, and those are things like illness, family vacations, work commitments, and so on and so forth. If you are going to be absent, please let your chair or staff liaison know at least 24 hours in advance. If you have 4 unexcused absences or miss 25% of the meetings, it is grounds for removal. So just be aware of that. You'll also do yearly goal setting for your boards and commissions, and you have a template in your binder if you have your binder in front of you, or your staff liaison will get you these materials. The template is meant to really give you an idea, brainstorm where to jump off from with the goals. It's not meant to be, restrictive and you have to follow it exactly, but the goals are reported back to City Council, and we need you to get those goals no later to us than March 5th. So I will report those goals, or City Clerk's office will report those goals to Council at a study session in March of 2021. So next up will be Matt Munch to explain to you what your legal duties and open meetings and public notice. He'll explain that more in detail. Thank you.
Looks like I'm up. If we can get the slides for the city attorney's presentation going, we can get started. Warning, once these slides come up, if any of you are going to be Ron Arguello's presentation for the quasi-judicial boards, you will see a striking similarity between some of the slides, except that Ron's have a little bit more production value to them. But it's all pretty simple, and what Abby went over is really the first step. That is to say, see, yep, those are Ron's slides, and you're going to see that they're better than mine. He's got lots of different colors, pictures and everything. Mine aren't quite that nice.
We're the ones that were first up there then, so. County attorney.
All right. While we're waiting on that, let me go ahead and go through the first bed, and we can catch up on the slides as we go. Abby really covered the important parts, or rather the initial part. There we go. Can we get the next slide, please? And that is essentially the purpose of the advisory boards and how they're distinct from the quasi-judicial boards. Those are essentially the 2 types of boards that we have: advisory, quasi-judicial. The advisory boards serve a tremendous purpose in the city, and that is you are an asset, matter expert, to give the city council information and to find out information about something the city council might not otherwise have time or resources to do themselves. A good example of this is the inclusivity board, which really has the opportunity to engage parts of the community and then get information and then report that information back to the city council, as well as pursue other goals the city council might have for it. That said, an advisory board is not there for the purpose of conducting inquiries. The quasi-judicial boards are going to be having hearings. They're going to be receiving evidence. They're going to be acting almost like a judge or a jury sometimes. The advisory boards will not. So as part of that, it's the purpose of the advisory boards to gather information and give to the city council, but not to take independent positions on issues with the public or the press, unless specifically instructed to by the city council, which might end up coming up. So next slide, please. All right, so here we talk about the quasi-judicial boards are the ones who are going to be doing direct inquiry into discrete subject matters. So why is a lawyer talking about this? Next slide, please. So there's really two things. We need to talk to you and prepare you for the ways that your role in an advisory board might actually impact or might be impacted by Colorado law. And that's really two things you have to be aware of. That's the Colorado Meetings Law and the Colorado Open Records Act. You can probably already see the connective tissue. Both of these are about transparency. It's about the city's goals and frankly obligations to be transparent with the public and not do things behind closed doors or hidden from the public. Next slide, please. All right, first we're going to discuss the open meetings law. At the end of the day, it's fairly simple. What it says is that all meetings of a quorum of 3 or more members of a local public body, and that's you, whichever is fewer, which in our case is always going to be 3, in which any public discussion, which any formal action may be taken, are declared to be public meetings open to the public at all times. And I have the citation there because I'm a lawyer and I can't help myself. At the end of the day, what this means is anytime you're discussing the matter that for the reason which you're on the board, anytime you're conducting any board business or discussing any board business or anything related to why it is you're on the board, if there's 3 or more of you, that's a public meeting. And that means we have to follow certain procedures when it is a public meeting. Next slide, please.
A Christmas party?
As
If you discuss things. Or
I said, I think we have a couple people
anybody
haven't muted their mics. If you guys would check real quick to see that your mic is muted, please.
too is things like,
Is that my comment?
no, wasn't.
Yeah, your mic is on.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Okay. Just say a local public body, any board, committee, commission, authority, you guys ready for yourselves. That's us. Next slide, please. So meeting means any gathering convened to discuss the public business in person, by telephone, electronically, or by any other means of communication. This is where it gets if it was just a matter of we have all public meetings are those where everyone gets together in the city council chambers and discusses things, it'd be really easy to navigate this. Problem is it's considered a meeting even if it's by phone, even if it's an email chain of 3 or more people, if it's a Skype Zoom meeting like we have right now, or similar to what we have right now, that's a public meeting. And that means all of the procedures required for a public meeting need to be done. Next slide, please. So what that says is any meeting of 3 or more people or any email chain, any phone call has to be open to the public. That requires that it's 1, the public has the right to be able to attend, and 2, public notice has to be provided. And I didn't put the, oh boy, this is a little bit of a, 24 hours in advance. There needs to be posted notice of the public hearing. There's a number of different ways that can post that. But the good news is you don't need to worry about that. The advisory staff is going to do it for you. Next slide, please. Have to be open to the public, have to be fully noticed, and have to have minutes taken recorded. Again, you don't need to worry about that either. Next slide. So what does this mean? So social meetings where public business is not discussed. If you end up going out for beers or coffee with the rest of your board members before or after the meeting, so long as you're not discussing public business, so long as you're not discussing the board's business at that wherever you were beforehand, that's fine. It's not a public meeting. If the conversation starts to turn to the matters of the board, just stop it and say, hey, we got to save this for later so we don't violate the open meetings law. So you don't need to worry about it that much so long as you're not discussing the public business. Next slide, please. All right, there are executive sessions. Now, executive sessions are meetings that can take place outside of public view. They are only for a very narrow list of reasons. Receiving legal advice, discussing litigation, negotiating strategies, purchasing real estate, personnel matters, things like that. You can't just have an executive session that's close. It has to be exactly one of the list of exceptions. And honestly, those things aren't going to come up very often with an advisory board. So really, you just have to assume that the open meetings law applies to anything that you do. If somehow it pops up under a circumstance where an executive session is required, trust me, you're going to know it. So you don't need to worry about that. Next slide, please. Now we're going to start to get to the bottom line. So first, the good news. The requirements for publishing notice of the meeting and taking minutes, you don't need to worry about that. Administrative staff can do that for you. And the open meeting law does not apply to the administrative staff. So if you have a scheduling or administrative question, all you need to do is communicate one-on-one with the staff person, and they can solve those problems for you, and you don't have to worry about invoking the open meetings law. Now, the bad news is the staff can't give that proper notice or take meeting minutes if they don't know the meeting's taking place. So what you have to do is make sure you don't accidentally hold a public meeting by having one of these conversations with 3 or more people on an email chain, by phone, outside of a published meeting. So we already pretty much discussed the solution to that, which is anytime you're in that sort of social situation or you're on email chains, if the bit that should be conducted in a public meeting starts to come up, just put it on hold and discuss it at the next public meeting. Or let the staff know 24 hours in advance. Really, they probably need more than that so that they can notice it and be present and take minutes. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to transition over to the Open Records Act, and you're going to see a lot of crossover here. The Open Records Law is similar, but it's dealing with documents. Every state has one. Colorado's is called CORA, Colorado Open Records Act. Every state has one. The federal government has one. They all differ a little bit. I can't say I'm familiar with the Open Records Acts of all 50 states, but certainly compared to a lot of states and compared to the federal government, Colorado's very much errs on the side of disclosure. The public has a very broad right to receive documents. This is based on principles I'm sure you're already familiar with. The government is responsible to and accountable to the citizens. And the goal of the Open Records Act is that it should be hard, if not impossible, for the government to hide things or to do things in secrecy from the public. And also a sort of general founding principle of democracy, that citizens be able to independently audit what the government is doing and not just take everyone's word for it. And being able to access documents directly is an important step in that. Next slide, please. So here's what the Open Records Act actually says, and I'm sorry to be parsing so much legal language for you, but it does become important. It is declared to be public policy of the state that all public records shall be open for inspection by any person at a reasonable time. And then, of course, public records means and includes all writings maintained, kept by the city for use in the exercise of the functions, basically anything that the city is doing as part of its job. Now, what I need you to take away from this is a very, very broad statement. This encompasses pretty much everything, every document the city creates falls one way or another under the Open Records Act with very narrow exceptions. Next slide, please. So, like I said, this is very broad. All writings made, maintained, or kept by the city. That's almost everything. And it's important to note, CORA does not list things that it applies to. A lot of people get this wrong. CORA is not a list of documents that are available. It says every document is available. And then it only lists a very narrow number of exceptions, a very narrow number of documents that can be withheld. Next slide, please. There are very strict time limits under CORA. We have to turn over those documents if we get a request within 3 days. However, it's a very large, very broadly stated request. We can add another 7 days on, but that still gives us a maximum of 10 days. That's a pretty short turnaround for city staff when they're processing a lot of documents. Next slide, please. Like I said, there are some CORA exceptions. They are very specific. The good news is, possibly the best thing to happen to you all night, is that you are not going to need to learn about all of these exceptions. You're not really going to need to know about any of them. If any of this comes up and you have any questions, talk to the city clerk about it. But really, you just need to know that there are some exceptions. For the most part, though, you have to assume that every single document you come across in the course of your acting on a board or commission, every single document you produce is going to be available to anyone who wants to see it. Next slide, please. All right, but I did bring up the exceptions because there's a couple things that a lot of people misunderstand. Here's a list of things that are not exceptions under CORA, which means these are not good reasons we can use to not disclose something. And that is, disclosure of this document would embarrass the city, or would embarrass an employee, would embarrass a city council member. We don't like what the requester is going to do with the information if they get it, or we think the requester is being mean, or we think the requester has it out for the city. None of those are things used to refuse disclosure. In fact, if you get into sort of the reasons for CORA and Open Records Act's existence, these are pretty much the reasons why the Open Records Act exists, is so that someone who might have beef with the government or want to limit or audit the government, or who suspects the government's doing something weird, can access these documents. That's exactly why it exists. So all of this is leading to a bigger conclusion that pretty much anything you produce, you have to assume people are going to be able to see. Next, please. Now, really, the point of this entire conversation is email. For the most part, the documents that you are going to be producing in your board and commission capacity is going to be emails, email communications with staff, email communications possibly with each other, email communications with anybody if you're given a City of Westminster email account. All of those emails, with very limited exceptions, are going to be subject to CORA, and you have to assume that they're going to be disclosed. Oftentimes, when we get large, voluminous requests, they ask for, in addition to whatever documents they're seeking, they will ask for all correspondence. And all correspondence very clearly includes all emails. We get those quite frequently, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if during the course of your tenure on a board or commission, we got some CORA request that I want all correspondence related to this board. And for the most part, we're going to give those over. The way that works is not usually going to be your problem. IT is going to be given the parameters of what it is we need to find, and they will search email accounts independently to find the relevant emails based on whatever they've been given, and then gather those up for transmission over to whoever requested. So if it's on a board or commission account, don't worry, the city IT people will find it themselves. If you're conducting commission communications on a private account, it might get a little more complicated, but we can worry about that when it happens. All right, next slide, please. I know I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but it's important. With very few exceptions, so few exceptions that you really have to assume that everything you write is going to be subject to public disclosure, all of your emails are going to be going out if anybody asks for them. So here's the one thing. CORA does not obligate. What CORA is it's an Open Records Act request. It allows people to request existing documents, to say the city has this document, I want to see it. It does not require the city to create documents at the request of a party. So you have to, if you're worried about your email correspondence, then really the best way to handle it is to only send those emails that need to be sent. Now, this is not something to be afraid of. A lot of people get a little bit in their heads about CORA and get frightened about it. There's really nothing to be scared of. If an email needs to be sent out, then send it. There's really not much we do that needs to be hidden from the public. So if a document needs to be created, create it without hesitation. Just know that it's going to be disclosed if someone asks for it. Not a big deal. But remember all those lists I said about embarrassing the city, or embarrassing a city employee, or embarrassing a board member are not reasons we can use to hide an email. This should give everybody just a little bit of pause about what you put in your emails in the first place. Maybe you don't want to be seen as a person using insulting language about another board member, or sort of flippant remarks that, look, we're all humans. They happen in communications. They happen in phone calls. They happen in emails sometimes. These emails, you have to assume everybody's looking. So really the point is, take a moment when you're writing an email that is about city business and consider what it is you're saying, and is that actually something that needs to be in that city email. Next, please, next slide. So if you're given a board and commission account, and I don't know the degree to which they create accounts for everybody, but if the city of Westminster gives you an email account for that, great. Do all of your email board and communications over that email. It makes everything a lot easier for everybody. Just know that everything you send through that email account can be subject to a court request. Nothing to be scared of, it just happens to be the truth. However, if you're given such an account, don't do any personal email on that board and commission account, because personal emails, again, if it's on the city's email account, you kind of have to assume that it's going to be available to anybody who requests it. And even if it's not, even if it contains something that might fall under one of the core exceptions, the only way we're going to be able to determine that it falls under one of those core exceptions is to take a look at it ourselves. And you might not want me or the city clerk or the people in IT to see some of your personal emails. So if you're given a city email account for city business, it'll make everyone's life a lot easier, including yours. Next slide, please. Or is that it? That is it. So the moral of the story is careful with your emails. Make sure that you discuss your board and commission business at the board and commission meetings. And if you ever have questions, contact your advisory members or the advisory staff one-on-one, and they'll be able to take care of you. And with that, I don't know, is this a format where we take questions, Abby? I'm not sure.
Yeah, Matt, if you'd be willing to hang around just for a few seconds. I've asked people to put questions into the chat, and I haven't seen any yet, but if people have questions, please put them into the chat. I'm sure Matt is anxious to answer anything you may have. And I apologize again for our technical difficulties tonight. And thank you, Matt, for your presentation.
My pleasure. I'm not seeing any questions so far, but I might be having technical difficulties too. Abby, are you seeing any?
I don't see any. Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think that we're probably good. If anybody thinks of any questions later, you can email them to us or ask your staff liaison and they'll get the answer for you.
All right. Thank you all for your time. I know listening to a lawyer is not the funnest thing you do with your day, but we do appreciate it. It will save the city a lot of time. Have a good night.
And actually, since we have a lot of council here, it would be great if council would turn their cameras on and maybe say a quick hi to their board before we wrap things up. Is that okay? I'm just going to go ahead and let you introduce yourselves. I'll just go down the line as I see you. Go ahead, Councillor DeMott.
Thank you, Abby. First off, thanks to Abby and staff for putting this on. I know that these things are difficult. Being an IT guy, I've been in that spot where things don't go well. I appreciate you guys powering through it. Secondly, I thank everybody for showing up tonight and giving some time on your Wednesday night. And more importantly, for what you do for the city and service. These boards and commissions are super important. We couldn't do all this work at all on our own, so we really depend on you guys to be able to serve your community, and so we really appreciate it.
Abby, do you want us to just go?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Go ahead, Councillor Scully.
Okay. So good evening. I'm Councillor Catherine Scully, and welcome to the Advisory Boards and Commissions onboarding session. It is such a pleasure to have you all here and to have you stepping up to volunteer in our city. I can't think of a greater way to serve than that. Many people from council have come from the boards and commissions, and they contribute greatly to our city. I did not have the pleasure of actually serving on a board or a commission, but I attended many meetings for different boards before I came on to City Council, and I was always so impressed at the interest and the enthusiasm and the amazing brilliance of some of the people that serve on, all the people who serve on our boards and commissions, and how they share those opinions with us on the City Council and help guide our city. I also want to thank our staff for all their work tonight. I know it's been kind of a trying evening with the technology. Just know that I have spent my day having a trying day with technology. So I think it's got something to do with Mercury and retrospect or something. I don't know. But so good job for getting through it. And just thank you to everybody. So have a good evening.
And Councillor Bowles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I sure would. Thank you, Abby, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. I think this is important. We get together and do this onboarding. We all get to see each other and hear kind of the rules that we ought to follow and all that kind of stuff, and kind of as a reminder. So thank you all for being here. I think it's very important. And you know, before I started serving on City Council, I served for a few years on the Inclusivity Board. So I know how important and how much fun that can be. So I actually serve as the liaison to the Human Services Board, Environmental Advisory Board, and Planning Commission. So I want to welcome all my boards and commission members here. So thanks for being here, and everyone, welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm sure we'll learn a lot, and it's good to see everyone, even if it's online. So thank you. Bye.
Councillor Smith, I believe it's your turn.
Thank you, Ms. Fitch. I'm Councillor Smith, and I am a liaison to the Elections Commission as well as the Historic Landmark Board. So best two boards here. Yay, people. Just kidding. No, I really appreciate all of you and what you do for our city. As many of my colleagues have mentioned, that we really truly can't do this hard work without you, and what you do for our community is good work. It's hard work, and I can't appreciate you enough in that regard, because just your thoughts and your perspectives offer a different perspective for us, and so that's invaluable in many regards. So thank you for your continued work. I look forward to at least sitting in on other boards here in the future, just to pop in and say hi and get to know you a little bit better and what you do for our community. So thank you so much, and all you do.
And Councillor Seymour, you're the last one.
Best for last, someone said. Good evening, Rich Seymour. Also, I can't say enough about the thanks that we can give to our residents that participate in the boards. I am liaison for the Personnel Board and Special Permits and Licensing, so I don't get to see many of you. I was going through the roster of who's on the meeting tonight, so it's great to see those names. Wish we could see each other in person more often. If you want even more fun times, you can come into the next meeting for the Quasi-Judicial Board and get all those rules. But thank you very much for your time tonight, and appreciate everyone's hard work on putting this together.
We don't have any questions in the chat. I have one question that says, when do our boards meet? And you will be hearing from your individual board about that. If you have not heard from them, please reach out to me, and I will make sure that you're connected to your staff liaison so we know that they have all the information that is needed for the new members. But otherwise, that's all we have for this session for the advisory boards. And thank you for your time this evening.
Sweet.
Right.
Thank you.